Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Baggage Claim. This is episode number 4. If you are new to this series, I just want to take a moment to welcome you. And if you have been viewing with us since week 1, I want to say welcome back. These series have been set aside just to give people an opportunity to process life, process the things that weights that they may be carrying. All of us have emotional baggage from time to time that may weigh us down. Some of us have baggage we don't know about. Others have baggage that we know that we're carrying and that we just want to unpack. So these series are opportunities for you to unpack your bags with Dr. Danita. None of the lives are meant to substitute professional counseling. So just know that we're providing educational tips, we're providing information. People that come on are giving their lived experiences. We just want you to be able to connect with us, connect with real life experiences, and have some maybe aha moments where you're able to say, wow, I think like that, or wow, that's in my bag and I need to unpack it. And so at the end of the lives, we just offer a couple of tips and things that you may be able to do to move in a healthier way. And so tonight, I am excited. We have 2 guests that are coming on tonight. And we did post the flyer that Damon Missouri would be with us, but he wasn't able to be with us tonight. We do have 2 guests that I want to introduce to you on this evening. And so we have with us tonight Courtney Wright, and we have Tamika Acombe. And so we thank Courtney and Tamika for coming in on this evening to share with us. And before I just go into some of their background, just to introduce them, if you have been coming on these lives, just take a moment for me and show everyone that you appreciate, that you have been getting good information by hitting that heart and hitting that thumbs up. Just flood, is it a timeline or flood that timeline with those thumbs ups and the hearts so that people can see that you have benefited from these particular lives. And we appreciate that. And then if you would also just go ahead and press share so that other people, this is a passion of mine, and I'm hoping that people can tell that I'm very passionate about this and I'm passionate about getting this information out. And so if you don't mind, just go ahead and share as well so that your friends and your family get the opportunity to be benefited by these lives. And so thank you so much, Courtney and Tamika, for coming on tonight. So I'll introduce Tamika. Tamika has over 20 years of experience in human resource leadership roles across pharmaceutical, tech, and financial services industries. She's passionate about the HR, the role that HR plays in an organization, and finds the positive impact that HR can make, and it's extremely rewarding. Tamika's scope of responsibilities have spanned organizational development. She's done talent management, training and leadership development, employee relations. In addition, Tamika has had responsibility for managing workplace climate issues, including investigating discrimination, harassment claims, and developing action plans for remedy. Tamika holds a bachelor's degree in communications from Kane University, and she is also a certified senior human resources professional. She enjoys spending time with her family and traveling. She's been married for 16 years and has 2 children, a 14-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter. Welcome, Tamika.
Thank you. Thanks for
And
having me.
we have Courtney. Courtney Wright is a mom of two sons, Destin and Declan. She's a wife, she's a singer, songwriter, and a licensed minister of the gospel. She currently works in the marketplace as a content and digital marketing strategist. Courtney is the leading lady of Kingdom Living Ministries, where her husband has served as pastor since 2009. Courtney is a graduate from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and her degree is in journalism and mass communication. All right, so we welcome both of you on tonight. And so our topic on this evening is on racial trauma in the workplace. And so last week and the weeks prior, we've been given definitions for trauma, and we talked about how psychological trauma is when an event or ongoing events and stressors um, put people in a place where they no longer have the capacity or the ability to cope emotionally with these events or stressors that are coming upon them in terms of weighing on their mind. And so when we think about workplace trauma, we're talking about that psychological damage that's done through what we would consider microaggressions and macroaggressions. And so those are the daily experiences that people have with discrimination, with the words and the slurs and the comments, or being passed over for promotion, those kinds of things, or the systemic things that persist in the workplace. And so that's what we are focused on tonight. And as we go into hearing the experiences and from Courtney and from Tamika, I want to share first the experience that I remember most when we think about microaggressions in the workplace. I haven't worked in corporate America, but nonetheless, I have had my experiences with microaggressions. And so, this first one that I want to share with you is I think it was in the 80s or the early 90s. I was applying for a job as an educator in New Jersey, and this particular man, he was a older white man. He probably was old enough to call me a colored girl. He was that old, and so he said to me that I would be the first African American in this particular school. And he asked me a question, and he says, "Do you think that it is more important to have someone who is qualified or someone who would be a good representation for the children of color?" And I looked and I was thinking, oh my gosh, does he think that you can't have both? And so I just looked at him and I said, well, if you're thinking about hiring me, then you have both, because I'm qualified and I'm a good representation. And I thought, how insulting was that for him to imply? But then I'm looking at his age, I'm looking at, I'm in my mind trying to give him a pass, and that's what we do, try to give passes, but he really didn't deserve a pass. That was insulting. And nonetheless, I did get the job, and I thought I should turn this job down. But I knew that those children, if that was the leadership that was represented, then those children really needed me. And so I thought that I did made a really good connection and was a very valuable asset to that particular school district. One other experience, when I was in New York again, my first teaching assignment, I had taken the test. I had passed the written test. I had passed the oral exam. In New York, the bar is set really high. If you pass the national teacher exam in New York, you can teach in any other state. And so I got my first teaching assignment, and my mentor, he said to me, The same thing that we hear over and over and over again. He says, "Oh, wow, you speak so well." And white people think that that is a compliment. And this, I have heard many, many black people say that that's the compliment that they get. They speak so well. And I thought, well, I took the same exam that you took. I passed it. Did you think that they lowered the score for me because I was black? And so, again, if you are white and you're listening, please, this is just an educational moment. That is not a compliment to a person of color. So, with that said, we want to hear from you, Courtney, and from you, Tamika. What were your experiences, or how have you observed the experiences of African Americans as it relates to microaggressions or macroaggressions in the workplace?
Yes. Well, I know for me, I'm born and bred, raised in the South. Completed my bachelor's education at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, also in the South, a little farther north from South Carolina, where I'm from originally. And so I was a bit naive when I got to New Jersey because I did not expect to experience certain aggressions because, coming from the South, you kind of expect it. You grow up with certain um, the certain mindsets that exist, and you learn how to deal with them, manage them. You're kind of taught to do that from an early age. Most of it is self-taught, but you get to know what it's like to be a person of color in a place that is a white space, if I can say it that way. So when I came to New Jersey in 2004, I did not expect to encounter the same level of aggression. So I'll just put that out there. And there was a lot that I saw that wasn't directed at me. And then the moment that it became directed at me, I found myself caught off guard, to explain it away like I did. And, over and over, it seems that there is a lower expectation, as described, of Black people in the corporate space, in a workplace, that we don't bring the same level of experience, of expertise, of excellence. I'm in a communication space. And so you talked about people being surprised, or that person being surprised that spoke so well. And with me, it's not as much speaking as much as it's the written word and the things that I do in the capacity that I'm in as there is an assumption that my writing is going to be lacking, that I don't have medical prowess or the the knowledge of syntax that I should have. I love that movie Finding Forrester, and our recently dearly departed Sean Connery starred in that, and he said, in his character said, you have to know the rules to break the rules. And a lot of the time, the assumption is that I don't know the rules, that people in these positions that I've observed, that they don't know the rules, and that, we have to be reminded to get approval for things. We have to be reminded of policies and procedures like we don't know them, like we are inherently lawless. So I've experienced that quite a bit. There was one experience that has really shaped me, has shaped the way that I look at the workplace, as it's the way that I look at myself as a woman, a Black woman in the workplace. But I learned a lot from it, where there was an employee, a colleague, who always asked me her Black questions. That's how it started out. Second day on the job. And partly I'm thinking, well, it's because I'm warm and approachable. It's because she finds me easy to talk to, and I should be honored, right? That there are certain things that she'd ask me and just be that vulnerable. But it continued to get more and more inappropriate. There were times where jokes were made about other ethnicities, and I was at the table, and I just began to feel more and more uncomfortable with this person. And I went to my manager, and things just never were handled in an appropriate way. And at the end of my experience in that role, I spent a year there. I was losing my hair and the crown of my head. The amount of stress I was under kicked in an autoimmune response. And I began losing my hair. I wasn't sleeping. I was working 12-hour days, trying to prove something to these people that, look, yes, I'm a Black woman, but I can produce. Trying to change their mind and taking on that responsibility in a way that I never should have had to. So that really shaped me in more ways than I sometimes am understand day-to-day basis, how much that experience has shaped me.
Yeah, and I think that that's where many people are. We have just become so accustomed to it that we don't really know how much it has affected or shaped our way of thinking. Thank you so much for sharing, Courtney. Tamika?
So I would actually say, being in HR, personally, I have not been the victim, if you will. All of my experience, my work experience in HR, probably has insulated me. And so it is not something I've experienced directly, but the story that Dr. Danita, you just shared, and Courtney, there is no shortage of those that I could retell from what others have shared, or I've had to, in my capacity, investigate or some other sort of action be taken against someone that was a part of that. So it makes me cringe, and at the number of stories that are just like, again, what you, Dr. Danita, shared, and then what the example that Courtney gave.
Yeah, thank you. As we think about some of the things that Courtney shared in terms of both of you, the importance of communication in the workplace, both of you in your work experience, I'm sure communication is of utmost importance, and Courtney did highlight that. What has been your experience with any challenges as it relates to communication between Black and those who are white on your job in the workplace? What kinds of face to face, written, email? I have heard people say that they have experienced challenges as it relates to being able to be understood in the area of communication. So, what could you weigh in as it relates to communication in the workplace?
For me, not so much being understood, but certainly there's reason for a pause. So each time I engage in, whether it's a conversation, whether I'm presenting in a meeting, sending an email, inherently there is this extra, how is this going to be perceived? Am I coming across the way that I want to? I think something that could be perceived as a challenge is what one might say that's not a Black person, what a non-Black person might say would be perceived differently than when I say it. So, is that a threat? No, it's not a threat. I'm just being firm. So something that has the exact same, again, whether it's the syntax or just the exact same phrase when said from me or again, someone of a Black person, could come across as being, well, that sounds like it's threatening, or is there anything else to that? When in actuality, no, I'm just trying to communicate effectively in a way to make sure we're on the same page. So it's more of, I think, an alliance, making sure I understand my audience, at least as it goes through my mind. And again, from an HR professional, I think my perspective is going to be a little different from someone that isn't in HR. But that would be what I would give it as an example.
And Courtney, thank you. And Courtney, you mentioned how communication, because of your role, communication is key. Have you had any experiences of being misunderstood, or have you observed others in the workplace being misunderstood?
Well, I tend to over communicate just because, that for me, it protects me. And just as Tamika said, to make sure that it's clear and effective communication, you have to be, or at least I am mindful of having to dismantle certain assumptions at times. And so I tend to over communicate. But what I've noticed a lot in the workplace with other people, not so much myself, is the interpretation of body language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there are certain things that are attributed to Black people with the way that, you know, we maybe communicate, the way that, you know, maybe neck craning, or I think we are people who tend to emote, and sometimes that is perceived as a threat. There have been times where I have been described as intense, which I think was a way to soften, you know, oh, maybe I'm coming across as threatening. I know that on a daily basis, especially when I'm in meetings, I am cognizant of coming across as the stereotypical angry Black woman. And, you know, and I've seen that. I've seen that happen. And I don't know if this is necessarily an observation that's rooted in communication itself. It's more of a bias that you see when Black people communicate. The assumption sometimes is that we just aren't knowledgeable or don't know what we're talking about, you know. And so I have observed that quite a bit.
Yeah, I I guess I like the word intense better than angry Black woman. But both could come across as an insult based on the way that based on the way that it's shared. What about, so in light of the thought being that we're intense or possibly angry Black women, of course, when we begin to talk about racial issues and things that we experience, and you talked about we tend to emote. Well, surely talking about racial experiences will bring up emotions. Have you had opportunities to safely be able to share in light of what we're experiencing now, or what we have been experiencing over the summer and into now? Have you felt the safe place to be able to share and communicate your experience of how you feel about what is going on in our nation?
Yes and no. I think that one of the positives that came out of the experience that I described at about the past issue that I had with the colleague at a former workplace, it empowered me because I began to think, if she felt that entitled to share her questions unsolicited, how much more am I welcome when people actually ask my opinion? So even if I'm not always the one to share openly, you know, how I'm feeling, especially in light of the things that are going on now, um, you know, I always accept the invitation to share my perspective. One of the partners we have at my current employer, they have been outstanding through just this whole ordeal, from George Floyd and even the other situations, Breonna Taylor, the other things that have happened and the victims of the summer of 2020. And she asked me, I just want to listen. Can you just tell me what you're experiencing right now? And I was just so grateful. And we were having a meeting where we were supposed to be talking about account related things. And she paused everything just to check on me because she knew that I was personally affected by those things. And I'll never forget one of my former supervisors who has also been a mentor to me. And I've never shared this with her or with the other coworker that I experienced this with. But when Philando Castile's murder, when that police officer was not convicted, there was another Black person working in my office. We were the only two there. And we were just very solemn. And she closed the door and she told people, don't bother us. We were having a rough day. And I just really appreciated that. So even though in that moment I was not invited to share or I didn't step forward and share, I just really felt heard and I felt considered. And I'm thankful for that. And those are the doors of opportunity that I look for. I think I personally take responsibility to be the one to walk through those doors, to take advantage of opportunities to educate, even if it's just to share how I've been impacted by those things, because there may not be another person of color in their lives who could communicate it in a way that they can hear in that context.
That's awesome that you had that experience, Courtney. I have had several clients that have come in to talk about the anxiety that they feel in the workplace because they don't get an opportunity to share, and everything seems like business as usual, and no one is acknowledging them. And so that's awesome that you had that opportunity. Tamika, being in a leadership position, have you experienced management providing the safe space and actually having words to say to their employees, or creating some sort of space for employees to feel comfortable to talk?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and certainly now in current day, given everything that's happening, it is very prevalent, and so at the forefront. And companies that are doing it well, it's more prescriptive. But I think individuals that are taking the personal responsibility to do their own soul searching, and just as a human being to say, hey, how are you as a person of color impacted by this? So I think that companies are doing their part, which is great. And again, individuals are doing it. Is something that I want to say to that, though, because I think what Courtney said is very key. Because I feel like I've heard a number of Black people, we're a little bit schizophrenic, no pun intended, I'll say it that way, but our relationship with how we want to see this healing come about, and we have a part. And so I've had heard a number of people feel that it's not their responsibility to tell a white person how they're feeling about something or to educate them. But I would beg to differ, because I think that that's when that door is open, when there's a courageous conversation, if you want to call it that we're able to share from the heart, from an authentic place of who we are, that's where the healing is going to come. It's not going to just be from what our employers put together or not put together. The continuum in terms of where organizations are right now is vast. And so there are some that are doing it very well. There's some that are slow to the party, and then of course in between. So we have that responsibility as well. And so if we don't see that managers carve out a place, it's okay to say, I'm okay today. I feel some kind of way about what just happened in the news yesterday. And I think we need to, have a little bit of vulnerability and know that it's okay for us to do that, and to make those opportunities if they are not given to us.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I have mixed feelings about that. I've heard that over and over, that we do have our level of responsibility to bring awareness. I've also heard many authors, many speakers on the topic say that we're just exhausted, in trying to share over and over and over again and not being heard. And so there is some truth to that as well, just the sheer exhaustion. And those clients that I have worked with, a lot of them feel uneasy about allowing themselves to be vulnerable because of the way in which the workplace, maybe the way in which the culture is, the relationships that have been established or not established. And so I personally would be very open to sharing my experiences and sharing that I'm not feeling well today, and I want to talk to you about it. Whether one is open to it or not, I feel comfortable. But from my experience working with some of the clients that have come to me, not everyone feels comfortable, and so it's difficult. It's difficult. It's all based on one's experience and the environment that they happen to find themselves in. But while I have you, Tamika, I wanted to just shift into another area, because you are the HR person. I wanted to know
That can mean a lot of different things.
when someone experiences discrimination or things that they feel they would like to bring to HR. How easy, how difficult is it What are the possible ramifications? I have heard people say, HR is really there to cover the organization. Are they really there for me? And so, if you would speak to that for a moment.
As companies are getting better at looking at and really monitoring their culture and talking about the employee experience. And so I would start by saying for those companies that are putting the effort, there's resources, there's programs, you'd have a better place of having a more partnering HR department. I will not pretend that I have not heard that, and I actually pride myself on being able to banish that myth, because in fact, HR is there for both. We are there for the entire organization from the top to the bottom. As far as the question of how easy or difficult it is to prove discrimination, I'm going to go with the word tricky, that it's tricky. When you start to talk about those examples of microaggression, the challenge there, of course, does it really come across as discrimination? So if someone's snide comment to me, is that discriminatory? Yeah, it is, because there's a racist motive. But at the end of the day, is my company going to be able to take some sort of action that I might think is justifiable because they made a snide remark? Possibly not. And so what I'll say to that is, what you want to think about is, what is we talk about pervasiveness. How often is it happening? Is it being addressed? Is another manager in the room when it's being addressed? Do I feel like the company is progressive, that we're moving in the right direction? And if you get to a point where you are beginning to recognize or find that you are the recipient of this unintended behavior remarks, to start to document. That could be as simple as just making a document. Staff meeting today, this happened, just to be able to jog your thoughts for when you do decide to go forward to make a formal complaint. And then know the process. Know what the process is at the company. What it looks like. And you do not have to go to your manager. You can go straight to HR, and so to do that. But what I would say is we have to sometimes do what I would say a little bit of an internal check in terms of what our expectations are. You may bring it forward, it gets looked into, and there be some sort of reprimand, but it may not mean that employee is fired. It may not mean that you get the promotion you thought you should have. So it's like, it can be it's complex. I'll say it that way. It's complex. But yes, it's fairly easy to do it. But I think most people, of course, are concerned about retaliation. And so it creates there's more of a dialogue than just how easy is this to take it to HR, because, then what is it that you want to be done with that? But you should absolutely make sure you know your company's policies, and so that you can, bring that forward if you need to. But it's tricky. And I know that's not it's not the answer, the sort of absolute resounding yes, but it is something that can be.
Well, when you say it's tricky, I'm thinking that people have to then assess what could possibly be the outcome of them making a choice to go to HR. So they could, their livelihood could be impacted. That's real. Their livelihood could be impacted. Maybe some of the luxuries that they had in terms of relationships with employees or relationships with other people in the workplace could also be impacted. Now they get shunned, or their name is written someplace as one who brings trouble.
Right. And what I would say, and those are all instances of retaliation, and a lot of times it's unintentional. Because if you bring something forward and you feel like, I used to be able to hang out at the water cooler, and now when I hang out at the water cooler, everyone gets quiet. Well, there's an unintentional action, because it was said that, or it was became known that you brought forward this claim. Those are very true, Dr. Danita. I can't pretend that it's not, but I think we have to remember the purpose of taking forth or raising a claim of harassment or discrimination. It's about getting a remedy, right? Having something fixed, having behavior stopped. And so it's a bigger picture. And yeah, you may not be liked because you raised your hand and said something, but it's that vulnerability that we have to get comfortable with, and I realize that is much easier said than done, and I'm saying that from an HR perspective, but there is a certain vulnerability that has to exist there.
Yeah, yeah. And Courtney, from an employee position, from an employee's perspective, has there ever been a time that you felt, I really think I should take this to HR, or I'm uncomfortable going to HR, or has there been an opportunity that you did go to HR?
Well, the place where I had the issue that was so impactful, they did not have a policy around it. So I didn't feel like I needed to go to HR first without at least going to my manager, because my manager was also this person's manager. I've never had a problem escalating something at the right time if I felt like it needed to be heard. Now that I work for an employer that I feel like it would never get to a place where a case like a lawsuit or litigation would have to be in place in order to implement a policy or have the company take a look at itself and say, hey, we need to address this. So I feel like at this point in my life too, like I'm over 40, so there's some magic that happens. When you turn 40, you will just say anything. I've experienced it. I already had, a touch that in my late 20s. Let me just be honest. My whole life, I haven't had a problem communicating. But
That's right.
but I feel empowered, and just I feel like there isn't anything that I need to hide from anyone, and I trust my own judgment. And I feel like if I decide after much consideration, thought, and prayer that something is serious enough to escalate to the proper person, then I would do that. In terms of others, so I have also been on the side where I've counseled others who don't feel the same way that did not feel to what needed to escalate. And at I remember there was a colleague I had one time, and his wife was terminally ill, and he was afraid to escalate an issue that was just way out of line because he was concerned about health benefits and losing benefits. And our benefits package was very generous, and his wife was doing well for treatment. And he said, I cannot leave where I am because I don't want to disrupt anything. So I have also observed that. I at this point in my career, I don't feel like there's anything that I can't say because I know I'm professional. I know I'm religious. I believe I have wisdom. And so, after spending time in prayer, if it needs to be said, and I pray about whether I'm the one who needs to say it, then I'm just going to do it. But I know that everybody is not that way. I understand that I am an anomaly.
That confidence is the key. Yes, Courtney and Tamika, we go way back. And so one thing that I know about Courtney is that she will speak her mind, and Tamika does not have problems. Uh, both of them will definitely, because they're professional, because they're confident, they will speak their mind and say what needs to be said. And so just thinking about the topic, and in terms of the optimism as it relates to where we are, is there a reason to be optimistic based on the current trends in terms of diversity, in terms of what we see in the workplace? Is there a reason to be optimistic about where we're headed as a nation?
I think so. I think that anytime a conversation is started, that there is hope. And I know that it's a long road. It's nothing that's going to be resolved quickly. Uh, I think about the time that I generation, not Jim Crow, in my family. My parents grew up under Jim Crow.
Yeah.
So when you think about the timeline that people in this country were enslaved for over 300 years, like it's not going to be swift, but I think anytime a conversation is open and people are starting to find a voice, I don't have a problem with anybody who is on social media saying how they feel. I think that Black people have a Me Too moment,
Mhm.
if I can say that. And I feel like those people who make past have been type to not say anything at work or not say anything because they didn't want to trouble the water, so to speak. I think that social media, for better or for worse, has allowed people to kind of find their voice and try to and given them a context to explain some things. And I also feel like it's opened the door with Black people to talk to white people. It's opened the door for white people to listen about what it's been like. And I think as long as there is a door of opportunity to have the conversation, and as long as there's compassionate listening, that there is hope.
I am very optimistic, and I think I'll go back to something I said earlier, and I do understand that ambiguity and having two schools of thoughts, Dr. Danita, when you said about in terms of us having responsibility. If you look at what has happened this year alone, these are unprecedented times, and we can never go back. We can never go back to what pre-pandemic was like. We can never go back to what pre-George Floyd was like, pre-Breonna Taylor is like. And so we have to seize the opportunity, but we have to continue to seize it. And that's where I see that there's that what I'll call dual responsibility, that we can't allow it to cease. We have to continue showing up. The number of diversity initiatives, the diversity roles, programs that are being put forth, the companies are creating in the last 6 months alone are enormous. And so that is showing that we're moving in the right direction, but we have to keep the momentum going. And the one other thing that I would just say with that responsibility, or us in terms of us being responsible, I think there's another key word that I would use as being accountable. So while we have a responsibility, I think that the organizations, that's where the accountability lies. Because we as Black people doing our part to make sure that we are educating, that we are sharing, that we are authentic, that we are, being who we are unapologetically, but then the organizations, our workplaces have, and our world at large, of course, but that's where that accountability lies in terms of creating the space for that and then making meaningful progress, after the conversations have been heard in terms of goals and so forth. So, but I'm very encouraged and very optimistic.
Thank you for sharing. So it sounds like, based on what you have been experiencing or what you're seeing in corporate America, that there is hope. I know that many people in the Black community are starting to say that we should create opportunities for ourselves and not necessarily depend on corporate America. And a question was posted today on my page, and it says, is it more effective as a community to strategically gain positions in corporate America, or should we create our own corporate community, buying Black only? And so that's not necessarily for you ladies to weigh in on tonight, but those of you who are on the live, go ahead and engage with that particular question, because there are many who are thinking we need to just have our own community and enhance our community economically by buying Black and maybe transition out of what corporate America can offer. So, ladies, last week we talked about Neely Fuller and a statement that he made in reference to the victim of a system can respond in four ways. The victim can submit, meaning they can lay down and accept whatever. They can cooperate, and that is just give me my job and I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll be your safe person. I won't raise any ruckus, so to speak. People can resist, meaning they will talk regularly, they'll share their experiences, they won't allow anything and everything to happen to them in the workplace. or they will engage in destruction, like the MLKs and like Martin Luther King Jr. and like Malcolm X. They're willing to lay down their life. What do you see as it relates to Black people, in the workplace? Do you feel like they have just submitted and said, whatever, I'm going to accept whatever? Where do you feel like we are as a nation? Are we cooperating? Are we resisting? Have people gotten to the place where they're willing to engage in destruction?
I would say that there are some, what I would see as outliers that are at a submission, and certainly maybe what might look like the most radical being willing to engage in destruction, but that the majority are between cooperation and resistance. And, and I think that might vary by the day. I might go in, or someone might go in and feel more cooperative in a season in their workplace. And then the very next year, feel more empowered. I'm what I saw, this injustice that I've seen someone else encounter, or I've encountered, has reignited me, and I want to stand up for it. So I think that's certainly where the lion's share is. I don't know if I could even figure out to put them into which camp, whether it's the resistance or the cooperation, but that is where the majority is, that of us are. And that I do believe that resistance is where we need to all move toward, and making sure that we're doing that in a healthy and meaningful way.
Yes, I personally that there were a lot more people before this pandemic who may have been at the resist stage, and more people because of what the pandemic has done in its economical impact on jobs and job stability. I think that there are people who are just, just let me working through this. And something that's very interesting is that the things that happened this summer with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, all of these things, it's almost like it's a challenge to that type of thinking. Oh, you sure you want to just cooperate? You sure you want to submit? Because these things are still going on in 2020. So I agree with you, Tamika. There may be some people who some days they feel like they want to cooperate, other days they feel like they want to resist. But I think it's healthy to be able to think about yourself and your family first. I think that is something that we need to allow people to do and feel comfortable about, and not judge. If we observe a person in the workplace, we feel like it's taking it when we wouldn't take it. I feel like we have to allow that person to prioritize personally, because at the end of the day, it's not all about, I mean, and I say this and I cringe, and don't come for me in the comments and don't come in my inbox, but I have to put my family first. Yes. And sometimes it's not that I don't have the same priorities or skills, but in that moment, my family has to come first. It's still a high priority to be able to be the one to speak up and to keep the conversation going. But there may be a season where my family comes first, and all of my children are have co-pays every week, and I need to do what I need to do to get along.
Yeah, and I think that is the important thing to consider. And there is no judgment here. It is important to assess what the ramifications would be for any decision that is made. It is my goal, however, while we are engaging in these lives, that people would find that place that they do feel comfortable, that lane that they feel comfortable. I found my lane, and my lane is mental health. My lane is bringing awareness to people to help them understand how racism affects them emotionally, and just bringing awareness in that way. And so it's my goal that people, as they are beginning to gain more information during this series, and becoming more aware of where they are as it relates to their place, just helping people to find what they can do to make a little difference, to make that small change, just from the perspective of what they are passionate about. And so if you're a writer, you may do a blog. If you are creative and you dance, you may just create a dance that speaks of a story that brings education and awareness. So wherever people are, and there absolutely is no judgment, but wherever people are, if they can find themselves in a lane where they can create change and we can all do it together, that's my goal for these lives. And so as we come to a close for tonight's live, if either of you just have any suggestions or anything that you want to share as a final comment as it relates to this topic, I just want to give you that opportunity to share, and then I will go into my sit, think, and reflect moment.
I just want to say a couple of things. I want to talk to the person who is maybe new to the job force and looking for a position. I think it's important to do your homework and find out where the companies that you're looking to work, where they are on the spectrum when it comes to these things, when it comes to their core values, when it comes to their position on race relations. Are there things in place to support employees of color? Are there affinity groups? You should ask those questions in order to be proactive about, protecting yourself from some of these experiences that we've talked about. Not that you're going to be insulated and you won't encounter those things, but at least when you do, there is accountability. There are policies in place. There is a safe process where you can make a complaint or make a suggestion, whatever the case may be, but you want to make sure that the workplace is friendly in that way. And the other thing I want to do is challenge people who are higher up in their career and professional experience. I feel like one of the reasons that I was able to really be successful when all of this stuff was happening is that there was a person of color who's higher up in leadership, and I was able to go to him and talk to him about things, and I knew he understood. And I just want to challenge you, if you are a leader and you're a black woman, you're a black man in a company, be welcoming to these more junior people who we share this experience together. Black people, I know that Black people are not a monolith. Everybody is shouting that from the rooftops now. But at the same time, we do have shared common experience in the workplace, because we all just are shades of the same color to people who are looking at us outside, from the outside. And so be welcoming to be a sounding board or to be a source of advice for that younger person who may be experiencing microaggressions.
I would echo what Courtney just said. I think that was very well said. And just also remember that, I know that there is the thinking out there that HR, as Dr. Danita said earlier, isn't there for the employee, but to challenge yourself to do the right thing in terms of escalating issues. And it may not even be that you go forward with what you might think of as a full-fledged discrimination complaint, but just to say, there's something awry here. I feel like I'm being treated differently, or this is going on and it doesn't seem like it sits with our company values, that it is the way in which we as a corporation want to be seen, or how we operate. And so sometimes just looking at maybe words that might, or using words that are less inflammatory, can still get you to the same result. Because what at the end of the day you're saying is, there's something happening that I don't like. I want to stop. There's an environment here that is not conducive to me performing at my best, being innovative, whatever it is, and I want that to change. And so just even challenging yourselves to think a little bit differently, and how is it I can have these conversations again, reaching and finding where you can be vulnerable, when you can be vulnerable, to do that. And maybe even talking to someone outside of your organization, to just as a sounding board before you take that forward. But to do so by all means, to not just sit and take that.
Well, thank you so much, ladies. Thank you for that advice that you are giving our listening audience. And I appreciate you being with us on this evening. And before we end, I just want to, as I do each week, have you take a moment to sit, to think, and to reflect. And so today's topic is in reference to your story and what you have experienced as it relates to the workplace. And so, as you sit and you think and you reflect about your story, how has your life been impacted due to experiences that you have had in the workplace? Sit and think about, do I experience? I have heard people who say that they experience stress every day that they prepare to go to the workplace, or every day that they prepare to log on, because of uh, the possible discrimination or the things that they have been experiencing. So take a moment to think about your story and think about your experiences and how they are impacting your everyday life. And as you process that, some of the things that I just want to possibly give to you as things that you can do for your emotional health. What Tamika and Courtney shared is what you can do in the workplace, but for your emotional health, definitely unplug. Now that many of you are working from home, it seems to kind of like roll into like home and work is all mixed and into one. Definitely take the time to unplug. You put in your 8 hours, that's your responsibility. And after that, you do have a family to care for. You have yourself to care for. And so I would say unplug. I would say take those opportunities for self care, do some aromatherapy, get your eucalyptus candles, your lavender candles. It really does help. It matters. It creates an atmosphere for you to be able to calm down and for you to be able to experience some peace of mind. Don't allow your workplace to just intertwine with everything else that is important to you, your family and your friends, your relationships. And so that's what I wanted to, the tip that I wanted to share with you on this evening. When I say unplug, I mean turn your cell phone off. The feeds are ongoing as it relates to all of the things that we're experiencing. So take some time to just turn it off, turn the TV off, and take that opportunity to exhale and then inhale some of the peace that is available for you when you unplug. Thank you again, ladies, for all that you had to share on this evening. I know that our listening audience has been benefited by your sharing your experiences as well as the tips that you provided. And we say thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you who listened, to tuned into our live on this evening. Again, we're just going to ask if you would go ahead and have some dialogue as it relates to the question that was asked. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, go to Dr. Danita Thompson and subscribe. And as the YouTubes are posted, you will get a reminder or notification. And also, if you don't mind, please, I will ask again if you will go ahead and share this live on tonight and go back to the previous lives if you haven't had an opportunity to review them. I am absolutely positive they will benefit you and even help change your life. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week with Unpack Your Bags with Dr. Danita.